Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right, let's kick off this deep dive and dive straight into Stephen King's 112263.
Yeah, this is a book that takes us where history and fiction really kind of like collide, where time travel becomes possible, and
Right.
the past, it's not just something in the history books, it's something you can actually visit.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just those dusty textbooks, right?
Yeah.
And what I think is so fascinating is that King really takes us on this incredible journey through time. But he doesn't shy away from the complexities of what it would mean to actually change the past.
It's true.
It's not all, sunshine and roses.
Yeah, no, it really makes you think about the consequences, both intended and unintended,
Exactly.
and how, one seemingly small change could ripple out in ways you never anticipate.
So we're following Jake Epping in this story. He's an ordinary English teacher who kind of stumbles upon a portal to 1958, and his mission, prevent the assassination of JFK. Pretty straightforward, right?
Seems simple enough.
But, as you delve deeper into this story, you realize that messing with time, it's anything but simple.
Oh, yeah, definitely not a walk in the park. It's almost as if the past itself is resisting any attempt to change it.
Well, that's where that concept of the past being obdurate comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's a word that means, stubborn or resistant to change. And it really sets the tone for Jake's entire journey. It's as if, the past itself is fighting back against his attempts to alter it.
Exactly.
Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what are some of the ways this obdurate nature of the past, how does it show itself in the story?
Well, one of the more striking examples is when Jake tries to prevent a family tragedy.
Mm.
On the surface, it seems like he's doing the right thing, saving innocent lives. But his actions have these unforeseen ripple effects. It's like a chain reaction where one change leads to another and then another, and the consequences aren't always positive.
Oh, wow. So it's like the butterfly effect in action, like that idea that even small changes can have huge, unpredictable consequences down the line.
Precisely. And King does such a great job of illustrating this throughout the book. It really makes you question, is it even possible to change the past without causing more problems than you solve? That's a question that haunts Jake throughout his journey.
Yeah, it's definitely a really thought-provoking concept. And it makes you wonder what the book is trying to say about free will versus fate. Does Jake really have the power to change destiny? Or are some things, just inevitable?
That's one of the big questions the book grapples with. And I don't think there's a simple answer. King doesn't necessarily give us a definitive answer, but he certainly explores both sides of that argument. And I think it's something that each reader has to wrestle with on their own.
And amidst all this time travel and historical intrigue, we also have this incredibly compelling love story between Jake and Sadie Dunhill, a librarian he meets in the past.
Yeah, it's really beautiful how their relationship unfolds.
I think their relationship adds this whole other layer of complexity to Jake's mission. He's falling in love with this woman who, from his perspective, lives in a simpler, more innocent time.
I think that's part of what draws him to her, the sense of nostalgia, of longing for a time when things seemed less complicated.
Yeah, it makes you think about what it would be like to be torn between two worlds, two different lives.
Yeah.
Could you leave behind everything you know to stay in a time that isn't your own?
Yeah, would the past really be better than the present, even with all its challenges? That's a tough question.
I know it's a really tough question.
Yeah.
And the way King describes life in the late 1950s and early 1960s, it's so vivid and so real. The cars, the music, the clothes, even just the way people talked. He really immerses you in that era. It's like you're right there next to Jake, experiencing it all firsthand.
He has a real knack for bringing the past to life.
I know. I actually found myself craving milkshakes and burgers
Oh,
from a classic diner after reading some of those passages. It's so well done.
I know. And those details aren't just there for atmosphere. They contribute to the overall authenticity and make that whole time travel element even more believable.
You're right. And we can't forget about the suspense.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like King is a master of building tension.
He's the king of suspense for a reason.
Oh, he is. And 112263 is no exception to that. Like, even though, we all know what's supposed to happen to JFK, we're still on the edge of our seats, like wondering if Jake will be able to pull it off.
Yeah, it's that uncertainty that keeps you hooked. Even if you know the historical outcome, the journey is what keeps you turning the pages.
Speaking of Oswald, King's portrayal of him is really fascinating. He doesn't shy away from the darkness and the complexity of his character, which I think, it makes you think about like the nature of evil and what might drive someone to commit such a horrific act.
It's a question that's hard to wrap your head around. What creates a monster? Is it nature, nurture, a combination of both? King doesn't give us easy answers, but he definitely forces us to confront those questions.
He does. He does. It also raises questions about like whether some individuals are just destined to play certain roles in history. Like, is Oswald just a pawn in some larger game, or does he have genuine agency in his choices?
That's a question that historians and conspiracy theorists have debated for decades. And King's novel adds another layer to that debate, exploring the psychological and emotional complexities of Oswald's character.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. And it's fascinating how King brings these really, really heavy philosophical questions to the table.
Yeah.
But he manages to weave them into this really compelling narrative that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Exactly. It's a wild ride, but it also makes you think about big ideas. Time, fate, the nature of good and evil. He tackles it all.
He does. We've talked a lot about the what ifs of changing the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the book also makes you think about the ripple effects of our actions in the present.
Absolutely.
Like, even small decisions can have unintended consequences down the line. Like, that's something that resonates with me even outside the realm of time travel.
It's true. It makes you more aware of the interconnectedness of everything, how our actions, even seemingly insignificant ones, can have a butterfly effect on the world around us.
Right, right. So, what do you think it is about this book that resonates so strongly with readers? What makes it stand out from all the other time travel stories out there?
I think it's a combination of things. You have the meticulously researched historical detail, these incredibly compelling and relatable characters, and these really thought-provoking themes that stay with you long after you've finished reading. King doesn't just give us a fun adventure story. He makes us think about the nature of time, the weight of history, and the consequences of our choices.
You're right. You're right. It's not just a light, fluffy read. It's a story that stays with you.
Definitely. And it sparks so many conversations about the what-ifs of history, the possibility of second chances, the consequences of meddling with the past. It's a book that stays with you long after you've closed the cover.
Now we've talked about a lot of different aspects of this book so far, but I want to dive a little deeper into this concept of the rabbit hole, like the portal through which Jake travels to the past. What do you think it symbolizes? What does it represent?
That's a good question. On one level, it's literally a gateway to another time, a physical portal, but I think it also represents something more. It symbolizes the allure of the past, this desire we have to escape the complexities of the present and retreat to a simpler time, maybe a time when things seemed less complicated, less overwhelming.
It's like a metaphor for that yearning for a second chance, a chance to undo our mistakes or relive those cherished memories. I think we all have those moments we wish we could go back to.
Absolutely. And there's also a sense of mystery and danger associated with the rabbit hole.
Right.
It's a reminder that the past is a foreign country, and we can never truly know what we might find there, what we might unleash.
It's true. It's a reminder that even with the best of intentions, our actions can have, unforeseen consequences. And meddling with the past can be a very risky proposition.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's one of the things that makes 112363 so compelling. It's a story that challenges our assumptions about time, about history, about, the very nature of reality. It's a book that makes you think.
It does. It does.
So, we were just talking about that rabbit hole and its symbolism.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder if you had the chance to just step into that rabbit hole, journey to the past, would you take it? Would you do it?
Oh, it's such a tempting thought, isn't it? To go
Mhm.
back and experience a different era or maybe even try to right a wrong. But as King shows us, like the past isn't some, idyllic playground. It's a complex and often brutal world, just like the present.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me was how King portrays the social dynamics of the 1950s and 60s. He doesn't shy away from, the racism, the sexism, the homophobia that were prevalent during that time. It's a stark reminder that the past wasn't always a better place.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. There's this one scene where Jake witnesses a group of white men harassing a black family, and it's a stark reminder of the injustices that were so common back then. And it makes you appreciate like how far we've come as a society, but also realize how much work still needs to be done.
Right, and it's not just a passing mention. King really explores these issues through the eyes of his characters, showing how their lives are shaped by the prejudices and inequalities of the time.
Yeah, like take Sadie Dunhill, for instance. She's a strong, independent woman, but she's also, constrained by the expectations of her era. She can't just pursue her dreams without, facing societal pushback.
Her character really highlights those complexities of that time period. There was this sense of optimism, of progress, but also this undercurrent of deeply ingrained prejudice and discrimination.
Yeah, it makes you realize that the past wasn't some idyllic paradise,
Mhm.
It had its own set of challenges, its own injustices.
For sure. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we tend to romanticize the past.
Right. It's interesting how Jake, coming from the 21st century, he has this more modern perspective on things like race and gender, and he's constantly bumping up against like the norms of the 1950s, which I think creates some really interesting moments of tension and conflict.
It's almost as if he's a fish out of water trying to navigate a world that operates by a completely different set of rules.
And yet he manages to form these genuine connections with people in the past, like his friendship with Deke Simmons, a black bartender who becomes like one of his closest confidants.
Yeah, I love their dynamic. That relationship really speaks to Jake's character, Despite his initial discomfort with the social norms of the time, he's able to see past people's differences and connect with them on a human level.
That's true, and let's not forget about Bill Turcotte, the troubled war veteran who becomes a really pivotal figure in the story. I mean,
Yeah.
his character is just so complex and so tragic.
Yeah, Bill is a really fascinating character. He's haunted by his experiences in the Korean War, and he carries a lot of anger and resentment with him. It's a reminder that the past isn't just about, happy memories and nostalgic moments, but it's also about trauma and loss and the scars that can linger for years.
Yeah, and his relationship with Jake is fascinating because it's both supportive and antagonistic at the same time.
Yeah.
Like they need each other, but they also clash over their different approaches to changing the past.
Bill kind of represents the impulsive side of Jake, the part of him that wants to act quickly and decisively, even if it means resorting to violence.
Right, and that contrast that really highlights the moral dilemmas that Jake faces throughout the book. Like is it ever justified to take a life even if you believe you're doing it for the greater good? Like that's a heavy question.
It's a question that has no easy answers, and King doesn't try to give us any. He just presents the situation and lets us grapple with the implications. And that's what makes it so powerful.
That's true. And amidst all this darkness and complexity, we still have this beautiful love story between Jake and Sadie. It's like a reminder that even in the midst of, chaos and uncertainty, love can bloom and bring this sense of hope and purpose.
Yeah, their relationship is such a bright spot in a story that can get pretty dark at times. It's a reminder that even in the face of tragedy and heartbreak, there's still beauty to be found in the world.
Yeah, and it raises these questions about the nature of time and the possibility of, finding true love in a place that's not your own.
It makes you wonder about all the chance encounters, all the missed connections that shape our lives, Like if Jake hadn't traveled back in time, he never would have met Sadie. And who knows how his life would have turned out differently.
That's a good point. And speaking of chance encounters, one of the most fascinating aspects of this book is how Jake interacts with real historical figures like Lee Harvey Oswald and his wife Marina.
It's chilling to see how King portrays Oswald. He's clearly unstable, he's dangerous, but he's also a product of his environment. He's shaped by forces of history and his own personal demons.
Yeah, the scene where Jake confronts Oswald in the Texas School Book Depository is it's so intense. Like you know what's about to happen, but you're still holding your breath, hoping that Jake can somehow change the course of events.
And it's not just Oswald. King really brings to life this whole cast of characters who are involved in the events leading up to the assassination. And you get this sense of how interconnected history is, how even seemingly minor players can have this significant impact on the course of events.
It's like this giant tapestry with all these threads weaving together to create this complex and ultimately tragic picture.
And one of the things that makes King such a masterful storyteller is his ability to blend historical fact with fictional elements in a way that feels seamless and believable. You're constantly questioning like what's real and what's imagined, which adds to the overall sense of mystery and suspense.
Yeah, it's like walking this tightrope between history and fiction, and King manages to keep us balanced the entire way.
And he does it all with such a deft touch. He doesn't overload us with, with historical details or weigh the story down with exposition. He gives us just enough information to ground the narrative in reality, but still, leaves room for our imaginations to run wild.
It's really a testament to his skill as a writer that he can make, such a complex and potentially confusing story feel so accessible and engaging.
He doesn't talk down to his readers. He trusts us to follow along and piece together the clues, which I think makes the reading experience all the more rewarding.
You're right, you're right. And he manages to inject these moments of humor and warmth into the story, even amidst all that darkness and tension.
That's what makes his characters so relatable. They're flawed, they're complex, but they're also capable of great love and loyalty and courage.
They are.
Yeah.
And they make us laugh and cry and cheer for them along the way.
Exactly. And that's what makes 112263 such a memorable and enduring work of fiction. It's a story that stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
And one that prompts you to, to think about the nature of time, the power of choice, and the ripple effects of our actions.
It's a book that invites us to consider those what-ifs of history and to imagine the possibilities of a world where the past could be rewritten.
Yeah. And in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, it's kind of refreshing to encounter a story that makes us slow down, think and engage with these big ideas.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that good fiction can be both entertaining and thought-provoking, and that stories have this power to transport us to different worlds and challenge our assumptions about reality.
And 112263 certainly does all of that and more. So, we talked about the characters and the historical context, even, the rabbit hole symbolism and all that. But I kind of want to go back to this whole idea of the past, like pushing back against change. It's such a central theme in 112263, and it really adds this extra layer of suspense to Jake's mission. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like the past itself has a personality, a will, maybe even a consciousness that's trying to protect itself.
Yeah. It's not just about Jake facing practical challenges that, logistical things. It's like he's up against this unseen force that's actively trying to stop him, to thwart his plans.
And King gives us these little hints along the way, these almost supernatural occurrences, They suggest that something bigger, something weirder is going on.
Right. Like that warped penny from 1958 that Jake finds. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It's such a small detail, but it's so creepy. It really sends shivers down your spine.
It makes you wonder if the past is somehow sentient. Aware of Jake's presence and actively trying to get rid of him, kick him out.
Well, so this kind of brings us back to that whole, fate versus free will debate, right?
Yeah.
Like if the past can push back, does it mean that our destinies are already written, that they're predetermined?
It's a question that's haunted, philosophers and theologians for centuries.
Yeah.
And I don't think 112263 gives us a clear-cut answer, but it definitely makes you think about the possibilities, the implications of it all.
It makes you question, do we really have control over our lives?
Yeah.
Or are we all just actors, playing out our roles in some grand cosmic play?
And I think that uncertainty, not knowing for sure, that just adds to the tension and the emotional weight of the story. You're always on edge. You're wondering what the past will throw at Jake next and whether he can overcome it.
Right. And then there's the question of consequences too. Even when Jake does manage to change something, for the better, there are often these like unforeseen ripple effects, and they create a whole new set of problems that he didn't anticipate.
That's the real dilemma, isn't it? Can we ever truly change the past without making things worse in some way, without causing more harm than good?
I don't know. It really makes you think twice about that whole idea of going back in time to like fix things. Maybe some things, are best left alone untouched, even if they're painful or tragic.
I think there's a certain humility in that realization, that we don't always have all the answers, that the past is this incredibly complex web of interconnected events, and any attempt to change it could have these far-reaching consequences that we can't even imagine.
Yeah. It's like King seems to be saying that tampering with history, like messing with that delicate balance, it comes with a price, a heavy price.
Yeah. And often that price is paid in the most unexpected ways. And Jake, he definitely learns that lesson again and again throughout the book.
We touched on the cultural impact of 112263 a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth emphasizing how this book has really like reignited these conversations about the JFK assassination. It's
Yeah.
brought it back into the public consciousness.
Oh, absolutely. King's novel has introduced a whole new generation to this pivotal event in American history, and it's prompted people to question the official narrative,
Wow.
to look into the various conspiracy theories, to really dig deep and see if maybe there's more to the story than we've been told.
Yeah, it's fascinating how a work of fiction can spark such real world, curiosity and debate.
It speaks to the power of storytelling, to engage with history in a way that sometimes textbooks and documentaries just can't. King makes the past come alive. He makes you feel these events, viscerally,
Yeah.
and he makes you care about the people who were involved.
That's true. That's true. And he does it all without feeling, preachy or pedantic. Like he presents the facts and lets the reader kind of draw their own conclusions.
Exactly. And I think that's ultimately what makes 11263 such a rewarding and thought-provoking read. It's a story that stays with you.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the nature of time, the weight of history, the consequences of our choices, all of that.
So if you could leave our listeners with one final thought from our deep dive, what would it be? What would you say?
I think it would be this. The past may be obdurate, it may resist change, but it's also a reminder that every moment matters. Our choices, our actions, no matter how small they may seem, they have this power to shape the future. And I think that's a really powerful message to take away from this book.
So maybe instead of trying to change the past, we should focus on making the most of the present and building a better future, like focusing on what we can control, what we can impact.
Beautifully said. And with that, I think we'll wrap up our deep dive into 112263. We hope you enjoyed this journey through time and imagination, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening and keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Bookercast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.